My son and his wife took me to a 5-star hotel for the very first time. We stayed the whole weekend, but then he just said, "Thanks for everything, Mom," and just took off, leaving me stuck with the bill and no money. Then all of a sudden, this older receptionist comes out from behind the desk and asks, "Are you Mr. Mitchell's daughter? I worked for your dad for 33 years. Right before he passed, he told me, "Give this envelope to my daughter when you see her." When I opened that envelope, I was in total shock. My son had planned this whole thing from the very beginning, and what I found inside changed my entire life. Let me tell you how I ended up in that nightmare. 2 weeks ago, Brandon called me and his voice sounded like it did when he was just a kid, all excited and warm like he actually cared. "Mom, I want to take you someplace special. Ashley and I want to thank you for everything you've done for us." My hands were shaking while I held the phone. 66 years I've been alive working my tail off, raising that boy with my own 2 hands, and I'd never ever heard him say words like that. I booked an amazing hotel, 5 stars, Mom. You're going to have your own suite, a spa, a fancy restaurant. The works. It's your gift. You deserve it. I just closed my eyes and the tears started to fall. I really thought that finally, after all these years of sacrifice, of long nights cleaning other people's houses, of ruining my knees scrubbing floors to pay for his college, my son finally saw me, that he cared about me, that he loved me. I was so stupid. On Friday morning, Brandon and Ashley came to get me in a shiny black car. She had on a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my rent for 3 months. He was wearing expensive sunglasses and that perfect smile he uses when he wants something. But I didn't realize it then. I just saw my son looking so successful and sharp, and I thought he was finally proud of his mom. The hotel was like a palace with these huge marble columns and floors so shiny you could see your own face in them. Crystal chandeliers hung down like they were raining golden light. The air smelled like jasmine and expensive wood. I'd never set foot in a place like that. I felt so small and out of place in my old brown dress and my worn-out shoes. But Brandon took my arm and whispered, "Relax, Mom. You belong here just as much as anyone else." Ashley was smiling right next to me. She looked perfect, done up like a model in a magazine. "Jessica, you're going to love the suite. It's got a garden view, a jacuzzi tub, everything." Her voice was sweet, but it was like sweet poison. I didn't know it, though. All I felt was thankful. I was just so happy. You know, that warm feeling in your chest, thinking that maybe my life was finally turning around. The suite was bigger than my whole apartment. It had a huge bed with white sheets that looked like fluffy clouds. There were giant windows that looked out on a garden full of red and yellow flowers. A cream-colored sofa so big 3 people could sleep on it. And the bathroom. Oh my God, the bathroom had these pearl-colored tiles mirrors with golden lights and towels so soft they made you want to cry. I just sat on the bed and touched the sheets with my hands shaking. This was really happening. My son brought me here. He loved me. The weekend felt like a dream, eating breakfasts with strange fruits I'd never even tasted. We had lunch at this fancy restaurant where the waiters treated me like a queen. Brandon even ordered wine. Ashley had this perfect, clear laugh. And I felt like I was part of something amazing, for the first time in years. I wasn't thinking about my debt, the bills, or my aching back. There was just this moment, this fake sense of peace. On Saturday night, we ate dinner on the hotel's terrace. You could see the lights of LA sparkling down below. Brandon lifted his glass and said, "This is for you, Mom, for everything you gave up for me." Ashley clapped. I started crying. We all toasted. But as I drank that sweet wine, I had no idea I was drinking my own poison. Sunday morning, Brandon told me to meet him in the lobby at 11. He said, "We'll check out together. Don't you worry, Mom." I came down right on time, pulling my little suitcase, and my heart just felt so full. He and Ashley were already there talking to the blonde girl at the front desk. I walked up to them with a big smile. Brandon saw me and gave me a huge hug. He whispered, "Thanks for everything, Mom. This weekend was one for the books." Then he shoved the bill into my hands. $11,000. And he just left. They walked away so slow, like they were just taking a walk in the park. Brandon had his hands in his pockets, and Ashley had her fancy purse over her shoulder. They were both laughing quietly, whispering to each other. I just stood there and watched them walk out the glass doors and get into the shiny black car, and just disappear into the LA morning traffic, just like that. Like nothing happened. Like I wasn't even his mother. Like the last 3 days never even happened. My legs just gave out. The bill was shaking so hard in my hands I couldn't even read the numbers. $11,000. Was that $111,000? I couldn't see straight. I make $800 a month cleaning houses. $11,000 is more than a year of me breaking my back working. And my son knew that. He knew exactly what I make, He knew what I had and what I didn't have. He knew there was no way I could pay this. Not in a million years. The blonde girl at the counter gave a little cough. "Ma'am, Will? That be cash or card?" Her voice was nice, professional, but I could see it in her eyes. It was pity. She was watching me fall apart right there and was trying to be nice about it. I tried to say something, but nothing came out, just this choked sound like I'd been punched in the gut. The lobby was still buzzing around me. A young couple was laughing by the fountain. Some guy in a suit was on his phone, waving his hand around. A family with little kids was pulling their suitcases to the elevator. Everyone was just living their normal lives, and mine was just shattering right in front of them. My face felt hot. It was pure shame just burning me up inside. I can't pay." The words were all broken, just a whisper. The receptionist just tilted her head, waiting. I could hear her pink nails tapping on the keyboard. "Ma'am, if you're having a problem, I can get the manager." A problem, that's what she called this. This hole I'd been thrown into. My son left me in a fancy hotel with no way to pay. He used me. He brought me here knowing exactly what he was planning to do all along. He planned it. He enjoyed it. Tears just started streaming down my face, hot and full of anger and shame. People in the lobby started staring. Some were curious, but others just looked away, embarrassed to see me fall apart like that. The receptionist got all nervous. "Ma'am, please, you need to calm down. We'll sort this out." But she didn't mean it. There was no solution. I didn't have $11,000. I didn't even have 1,000. I barely had bus fare to get home. Then I heard slow, shuffling footsteps on the marble floor. An older person. I looked up, my eyes blurry with tears, and saw an old woman walking out from behind the counter. She had to be over 80 years old. Her hair was completely white, pulled into a bun, and her face had deep wrinkles like she'd seen it all. And her eyes, they were honey-colored, and they stared at me so intensely. She had on the hotel uniform, but it looked different, older, like she'd been wearing it for 30 years. She walked toward me. Her steps were short but steady. The blonde receptionist just stared at her, looking surprised. "Ruth, you don't have to." But the old woman just raised a wrinkled hand to shut her up. Ruth. The name meant nothing to me back then. The old woman stopped right in front of me. She was so close I could smell lavender and thyme on her. She just studied my face like she was looking for something. Her eyes searched mine, and they looked both shocked and "You're Mr. Mitchell's daughter." Her voice was scratchy but strong. That question hit me like a ton of bricks. Mitchell, my dad. I hadn't heard anyone say that name in over 30 years. He died when I was 35. He left me all alone with a little kid and not a single penny. All I had were fuzzy memories of a serious guy who worked too much and never said much. Yes, I'm his daughter," my voice cracked. I was so confused. How could this woman know who my dad was? Ruth closed her eyes for a second like she was fighting back some big feeling. Then she opened them, and a single tear ran down her wrinkled cheek. "I worked for your father for 33 years from when I was 20 until the day he passed." The whole lobby just went silent. All the noise just faded away. It was like it was just the two of us. "Your father was a great man," she said. "Difficult, demanding, but great. I was his housekeeper. I cleaned, I cooked, I took care of everything for him." Her voice was shaking with every word. It felt heavy with something I just didn't get. Right before he died, he called me to his bedside. He was so sick he could barely talk. He took my hand and told me something I'll never forget. Ruth reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out an old yellowed envelope. It was folded and beat up from the years. The corners were soft and the ink was almost gone, but I could still see my name written in a shaky hand. "Jessica." She said he told her, "Ruth, one day my daughter's going to come here, and she's going to be alone. She's going to be lost. When you see her, you give her this. It's the only thing I can give her now." She held the envelope out to me, her hands shaking. I just stared at it, afraid to touch it. He knew. He knew I'd end up here. He got me this job at the hotel 30 years ago. He told me to wait, that you'd show up someday. And now you're here. Her voice totally cracked. After 33 years, I can finally keep my promise. My fingers were numb when I took the envelope. It was heavy. There was something solid inside, not just paper. I opened it real slow, like every second was dragging on. Inside was a folded letter and an old rusty metal key. The key had a number carved into it, 447, and a little leather tag with a handwritten address was hanging off it. I unfolded the letter. It was my dad's handwriting. That same slanted writing I remembered from the few times he signed papers at home. The words hit me hard. "Jessica, if you're reading this, it's because you finally found out that nothing in our family was what it seemed. I'm sorry for the secrets. I'm sorry I left without any explanation. This key opens a storage unit and Ruth will give you the address. Inside you'll find the truth about who I really was and who you are. Go by yourself. Don't trust anyone but you. Your father, William Mitchell. I read the letter 3 times, but the words still didn't make any sense. Secrets, truth, who he really was. Every single sentence was a total mystery. My dad was a quiet, hard-working guy who left early and got home late. He never talked about his job. He never shared anything personal. When he died, I figured I'd get a little inheritance, something to help me raise Brandon. But there was nothing, just debts I had to pay by selling off the little furniture we had left. And now this. 30 years later, a rusty key and a letter telling me everything was a lie. I looked up at Ruth. She was watching me with those honey-colored eyes full of what looked like pity and a little bit of urgency. "What's in that storage unit?" My voice came out way louder than I expected, cutting right through the quiet. Ruth shook her head slowly. "I don't know. Your father never told me. He just asked me to give you this when you seemed lost and alone. And here you are." I looked down at the leather tag on the key again. The address was in black ink that was almost faded. Industrial Street, 447, Warehouse 12, East Side. I knew that area. It was a rundown part of the city, just old warehouses and busted streets where nobody went after dark. A dark, forgotten place, perfect for hiding secrets you don't want anyone to ever find. "Ma'am?" The blonde receptionist's voice snapped me right back to reality. And the hotel bill. She was still standing there, holding that piece of paper for $11,000 that I couldn't pay. The shame hit me all over again, but now there was something else. Rage, a cold, sharp anger building up in my chest. My own son did this to me. He brought me here knowing exactly what was going to happen. He planned it. Ruth turned to the receptionist with an authority I never expected from someone her age. "I'll take care of the lady's bill. Put it on my tab. I'll pay it off in pieces from my paycheck." The receptionist opened her mouth to argue, but one look from Ruth shut her right up. "Your father saved my life more times than I can count. It's the least I can do for his daughter." I was speechless. The words were stuck in my throat. This woman, this stranger who'd kept a secret for 30 years, was paying my debt. A debt my own son set up just to destroy me. "I can't take this." Ruth took my hands in hers. They were wrinkled and cold. "Yes, you can, and you're going to. But first you need to go to that address. You're going to open that storage unit, and you're going to find out why your son did this." Her words made my blood run cold. "What do you mean?" Ruth squeezed my hands with a surprising amount of strength. "Your father told me things before he died. Things about your family, about secrets he kept buried his whole life. And he told me that someday someone from your family would come looking for that truth. But he never thought you'd be the one who needed it. He figured it'd be someone else." A shiver ran down my spine. Who else knew about this? Ruth let go of my hands and stepped back like it hurt her to say what came next. "Your son was here 6 months ago. He asked for me. He said he was researching his grandfather's life for a school project. I told him I'd worked for Mr. Mitchell, that I knew him really well. He asked me so many questions, way too many, about properties, about money, about who got what. The floor dropped out from under me. Brandon had been here. He'd talked to Ruth. He was digging into my father's past 6 months ago. He spent 6 months planning to bring me here, to humiliate me, to leave me with nothing. But why? What did he find out that I didn't know? What did you tell him?" My voice was just a shaky whisper. Ruth looked down ashamed. "I told him your father had property, that he'd left some things unsettled. I didn't give him details, but it was enough. I saw the pure greed in his eyes light up, and I knew I'd made a mistake. I felt sick to my stomach. My son came here, manipulated this old woman for information, and then planned this whole thing. The hotel trip, the fancy stuff, the fake smiles, all. So he could leave me broke while he hunted for whatever my father hid. I have to get to that storage unit." The words came out firm, filled with a determination I didn't know I had. Ruth nodded slowly. "Go now before he beats you to it. Because if Brandon finds out where it is, he won't leave you a thing." I walked out of the hotel in a daze. I gripped the key so tight in my fist the metal cut into my skin. The afternoon sun hit my face, blinding me for a second. The city kept on moving, like it didn't care about my pain. Cars sped by. People rushed past. Street vendors yelled out their prices. And I just stood there holding a rusty key and a truth I still didn't understand. I caught a bus heading to the east side. The ride took almost an hour. I sat by the window watching the city change from clean, modern buildings to old places covered in graffiti with broken windows. The streets got narrower, dirtier, and more dangerous. By the time I got to my stop, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky orange and deep purple. 447 Industrial Street looked exactly the same as it did decades ago. Just a long row of rusty metal warehouses. The doors were corroded shut with giant padlocks. Some had broken windows. Others were sealed up completely. Weeds were growing up through cracks in the pavement. Trash was piled up in the corners. It was dead quiet except for some dogs barking way off. I walked slow, counting the numbers on the doors. Warehouse 8, Warehouse 9, Warehouse 10. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. And then I found it, Warehouse 12. A dark gray metal door taller than me with a huge padlock that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Thick cobwebs hung in the corners. Dust was on every single inch. I pulled the key out of my pocket. My hands were shaking so bad it took me 3 tries to get the key in the lock. When it finally slid in, the metal made this sharp screeching sound that gave me chills. I turned the key real slow. The lock popped open with a dry click that echoed in the silence. I took it off and let it drop to the ground. Then, I pushed the door with both hands. It opened slowly, grinding like it was screaming in pain. A blast of cold, damp air hit me from inside, and it smelled like mildew rust and something else, something really old, something that had been waiting here for 30 years. I looked inside. It was pitch black, just shadows dancing around. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, and I took the first step toward the truth my dad buried. What I saw in there, I knew my life was never going to be the same. My phone's flashlight cut through the dark with a shaky beam. I could only see about 6 feet ahead of me. The inside of the warehouse just smelled abandoned, like years of silence trapped between cold metal walls. My footsteps echoed on the cracked concrete. Each echo sounded like a ghostly whisper. I moved forward slowly, shining the light into every corner, every shadow that seemed to move. The place was bigger than I thought, maybe 65 feet long and about 30 feet wide. The walls were lined with rusty metal shelves, stacked with cardboard boxes all rotted from the damp. Some had fallen apart, spilling junk all over the floor. Yellowed papers, torn up folders, blurry old photos. Right in the middle of the warehouse, there was an old wooden table covered in a thick layer of dust like gray velvet. And on that table, sitting right in the center, was a big manila envelope. It was perfectly clean, no dust, like someone left it there yesterday. I walked up to it slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. This didn't make any sense. Everything else in here was trashed from decades of neglect. But that envelope looked brand new. Someone had been here, recently. My hand was shaking, but I reached out and picked it up. It was heavy. There was definitely more than just paper inside. I opened it carefully and dumped everything out on the table. Documents, dozens of them. Property deeds, birth certificates, death certificates. Some old black and white pictures and a brown leather notebook with bent corners. I stuck my phone between my teeth to hold the light and free up my hands. I started going through them. The first deed was for a house right in the middle of the city. The address was 328 Liberty Avenue in my father's name, William Mitchell, dated 1982. I'd never seen that address. I didn't know my dad owned anything besides our little house. I grabbed the next document, another property, and another. 5 houses total, all in expensive parts of the city. All of them bought in the 70s and 80s. How was that even possible? My dad worked in a textile factory. He made enough for us to get by, but we never had anything extra. We never went on vacation, got new cars, or wore nice clothes. My mom sewed our skirts from scraps. I wore my shoes until the soles fell right off, and my father owned 5 properties. My hands were shaking, holding the papers that changed everything. I picked up a birth certificate. The name on it made my heart stop. Kevin Mitchell Davis, born April 15, 1968. Father's name, William Mitchell. Mother's name, Patricia Davis. I read the thing 3 times, but the words didn't change. My father had another kid. A son born 6 years before me with another woman. A brother I never knew I had. I frantically searched through the pile of papers. I found another certificate. Melissa Mitchell Torres, born in 1975. Father William Mitchell. Mother Martina Torres, another daughter 3 years younger than I was. I couldn't catch my breath. My father had a whole other family, maybe 2, maybe even more. I grew up thinking we were his entire world, but he had other kids, other women, other secret lives I knew nothing about. The pictures confirmed it all. I picked one up and held it closer to my phone's light. My dad looking young, maybe 30, with his arm around a smiling, dark-haired woman. She was holding a baby. Behind them was a big house with a yard. The next photo showed my dad with another woman, a blonde this time, standing in front of a brand new car. In another, he was alone in a suit and tie in front of an office building. He wasn't a factory worker. He was somebody else completely. I opened the leather notebook with trembling hands. The pages were filled with my dad's slanted handwriting. They were ledgers, detailed notes of his income and expenses. January 1978, rent collection, $3,200. Payment to Patricia, $500. Payment to Carol, my mom, $400. Savings for a new property, $2,300. It was page after page, year after year, a cold calculated list of how he split his money between his different families. I just sank to the concrete floor, clutching the notebook to my chest. Everything I believed about my father was a complete lie. He wasn't some humble man who worked his butt off for us. He was a businessman who collected properties, rented out houses, and took advantage of people. He was keeping multiple families who knew nothing about each other. And my mom never knew. She never guessed the money he gave her was just a fraction of what he really had. But that still didn't explain why Brandon did what he did. How did he figure all this out? So leaving me at that hotel, that was part of his plan. I dug through the papers until I found something recent. It was a letter from 7 months ago. The handwriting wasn't familiar. It said, "Dear Brandon Cooper, about your investigation into William Mitchell's estate, I can confirm the properties are still in his name. But there's a sealed will here at the notary office. It can't be opened until all the legal heirs are found and told about it. So far, the known heirs are Kevin Mitchell Davis and Melissa Mitchell Torres. Sincerely, Notary Public number 47. So that was it. Brandon looked into his grandfather. He found out about the properties, the will, Ben, and the other heirs. And he decided all that money was his. But to get it, he needed me, the other legal daughter, to either disappear or be too broken to fight him in court. That's why he did it. The hotel, the humiliation, leaving me with no money. He wanted to break me down, to completely ruin me. So when it was time to open the will, I wouldn't have the fight or the money to claim my share. A metal clank snapped me out of it. It came from outside. I heard footsteps. Someone was walking around the warehouse. I shot up, shoved the important papers in my purse, and killed the flashlight on my phone. Total darkness. The footsteps got closer, slow, heavy. Like they knew where they were going. They stopped right at the warehouse door. "I knew you'd be here, Mom." Brandon's voice was like ice cutting through the quiet. None of that fake kindness he'd been using all weekend. I flicked my phone's light on and aimed it at the door. There he was, just a dark shape against the sunset. The expensive sunglasses and that perfect smile were gone. His face was like stone, and his eyes had a darkness in them I'd never seen before. "Ruth told you, didn't she? That stupid old lady just couldn't keep her mouth shut." He stepped inside. I just backed up without thinking. "I spent 6 months digging into your father's life. 6 months. Just to find out the saint I never knew was really a liar who got rich while we had nothing. And now all that money is mine." "He had other kids, Brandon." My voice was stronger than I thought it'd be. "There's a will, other heirs. It's not all yours." He laughed, but it was a cold, empty sound. "They don't even know you're alive. And if you don't legally exist, you can't claim a dime. That's why I had to ruin you first. Leave you with no money, no help, no pride. So when they finally open that will, you'll be too broken to even try to fight me." Ashley showed up behind him, arms crossed, with that cold look I now knew was the real her. "The hotel. That was my idea," she said, and you could just hear the venom in her voice. "Hit you emotionally and financially all at once. Pretty smart, right?" They both laughed, and the sound made me sick. My own son and his wife planned this whole thing like it was some kind of sick game. Like I wasn't a person. Like my pain was just fun for them. "You're not keeping it." The words just slipped out before I could stop them. Brandon took another step closer and his face got real ugly. "You don't have a choice, Mom. You're already finished. You have nothing left. And when I'm done, you won't even have a roof over your head." But then a deep man's voice cut through the silence from the back of the warehouse. "She's not alone." We all just froze. The voice came out of the shadows at the far end of the warehouse. It was heavy and firm, full of authority. I aimed my phone light toward the sound, and the shape of a man slowly walked out of the darkness. He was tall, with broad shoulders. He looked about 60 years old. He had short gray hair, deep wrinkles by his eyes, and a square jaw that felt strangely familiar. He was just wearing simple clothes, jeans, and a dark green shirt, but the way he stood there demanded respect. He stopped about 10 feet from us and crossed his arms over his chest. His eyes looked Brandon up and down with pure disgust before they landed on me with an expression I couldn't figure out. There was pain in them, but also like he recognized me. "Who the hell are you?" Brandon stepped forward. He was trying to get control again, but his voice wasn't so steady now. The man didn't answer right away. He just stared at me, really studying me like he was looking at a ghost. "I'm Jake," he finally said, his voice raspy. "Jake Mitchell, your brother." The whole world just stopped turning. The words just hung in the thick air of the warehouse. Brother. That birth certificate I'd seen just minutes ago flashed in my mind. The son my father had 6 years before me with another woman. The heir Brandon was talking about. He was here. He was waiting in the shadows this whole time. "It can't be," I whispered. but deep down I knew it was the truth. He took a step into the light so I could see him better. He had the same eyes as my father, dark brown, with that sharp gaze I remembered from when I was a kid. The same nose, the same jawline. It was like seeing my father standing there alive again. Just 30 years older. Tears started to blur my vision and I couldn't stop them. Jake pulled a folded piece of paper out of his shirt pocket and held it out to me. 3 months ago, I got a letter from a lawyer's office. They told me my father had died 30 years ago and left a will, and that I was one of the heirs. I didn't know a thing about it. My mother never once talked about William Mitchell. I never knew my father. I grew up believing he abandoned me before I was even born. I took the paper with shaking hands. It was the same letter from the lawyer's office that I'd seen in the other documents. I started digging, Jake went on. His voice was tight with emotion he was trying to hold back. I found out I had sisters, you, Jessica, and another one. Melissa. She died 10 years ago in an accident. I found out our father was a man who lived a double life. That he lied to all of us, that he built a fortune behind our mothers' backs while they worked themselves to the bone to support us. His voice cracked on the last word. I saw the raw pain in his eyes. It was the same pain I was feeling. We were both caught in the same lie, victims of the same man who gave us life but hid the truth. When I found out this warehouse existed, I came to look around. I found everything. The documents, the properties, the accounts, the letters. And I found something else. He turned to Brandon, and his look was just pure ice. I found out your son was snooping around, that he'd bribed employees at the notary to get private information, that he'd hit up Ruth for details on the properties, and I realized he was planning something. So I decided to wait, to watch, to see just how far he was willing to go. Rye walked slowly toward Brandon, who backed away without even thinking. Ashley just pressed herself against the wall. All that cockiness, she had just vanished. What I didn't expect was for you to be so damn cruel that you'd humiliate your own mother in front of everyone, that you'd leave her with nothing. No money, no dignity. Just to completely break her. Rye stopped right in front of Brandon. He was a lot taller, a lot more intimidating. You're worse than our father. At least he had the decency to keep his lies a secret. You used them as weapons against the woman who gave birth to you. Brandon tried to look tough, but his voice came out all shaky. That money is mine. I'm his grandson. I have more of a right to it than you do. Some bastard who never even knew the old man. Jake didn't move, but you could see his jaw clenched tight. Legally, we're all equal heirs. Jessica, me and you through your mother. But here's the difference. I didn't come here to steal. I came to find the truth and to make sure no one else got hurt because of William Mitchell's secrets. He turned to me and his whole look softened. Jessica, I know this is a lot. I know your whole world just fell apart, but there's something else. He pulled another document from his inside shirt pocket. This one was older, yellowed with official seals. Our father's will was really specific. He split everything equally among his legitimate children, but he added a clause. If any heir tries to cheat another one out of their share through lies or force, they automatically lose their share. Those words landed like a bomb in the quiet warehouse. I looked at Brandon and his face just went pale. Rye kept on, his voice cold. Your son planned to destroy you just to take your share. He paid private investigators. He bribed employees. He planned to leave you completely broke and emotionally wrecked. I have proof of everything. I made sure to gather every piece of evidence over the last 3 months. He took out his phone and started scrolling through photos. Emails between Brandon and a private investigator, bank transfers to the dirty employees at the notary, text messages between him and Ashley planning every single detail of that weekend at the hotel. Everything was there. Every step of their cruel plan, all saved as digital evidence that would legally destroy them. According to that clause in the will, Brandon loses any right to the inheritance. And you, Ashley? He gave my daughter-in-law a stone-cold look. As her accomplice, you're not getting a dime either. Ashley let out a sob. This is a setup. You can't prove anything. Rye just smirked. Oh, I can, and I will. I've already given copies of all this proof to the lawyer handling the will. The hearing is in 2 weeks. By then, you two won't just lose the inheritance. You'll be facing charges for fraud, emotional blackmail, and conspiracy. Brandon just exploded. You're a meddling bastard. This isn't your business. She's my mother, not yours. He took a threatening step toward Jake, but Jake didn't even flinch. Exactly. She is your mother, the woman who raised you, who gave up everything for you, who gave you every single thing she had, and you repaid her by stabbing her in the back. That makes you worse than a thief. It makes you a monster. The silence after that was so thick you could feel it. Brandon was shaking with helpless rage. Ashley was sobbing against the wall, her whole perfect act completely destroyed. And I just stood there trying to process it all. In one afternoon, I'd lost my son, but I'd gained a brother. My father was a liar. But he was smart enough to protect us from the grave. Everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. Jake walked over and put his big rough hand on my shoulder. I know this hurts. Believe me, I really do. I went through the same thing 3 months ago. Finding out your whole life was built on lies is like dying and being born all over again. But there's something you need to understand. His voice got softer, almost gentle. Our father was a terrible man, but we don't have to be. We can choose what to do with everything he left us. I don't want his money. The words just fell out of my mouth before I could even think. Jake nodded slowly like he was expecting that answer. Me neither, at least not all of it. That's why I have an idea. But first we need to deal with this. He turned to Brandon one last time. You've got 2 options. You walk out of here now. You stay away from your mom for good, and maybe I won't press charges, or you can try to fight this in court, and I'll personally make sure you spend the next few years in a jail cell. Brandon looked at me with pure hate. There was nothing left of the son I once loved, just a cruel stranger who used my love as a weapon against me. This isn't over. He spat the words out like they were poison. He grabbed Ashley by the arm and they both stormed out of the warehouse, their footsteps echoing on the metal floor until we couldn't hear them anymore. And then for the first time all afternoon, Jake and I were alone. The silence that filled the space after they left was different. It wasn't heavy or scary. It was just strange, filled with unanswered questions and truths we'd only just started to uncover. Jake just stood there in front of me with his hands in his pockets, looking at me with a mix of curiosity and caution, like I was a hurt animal that might lash out or run at any second. And maybe he was right. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know if I should cry or scream or just fall on the floor and give up completely. How'd you know I'd be here today? My voice was hoarse, worn out from all the emotions of the last few hours. Jake just shrugged, leaning on a rusty shelf. I wasn't 100% sure, but I knew what your son was up to. I knew he'd bring you to that hotel that he was going to ditch you, and I figured Ruth would do what she promised. So, I've been coming here every afternoon for the last 2 weeks just waiting. Today was finally the day, 2 whole weeks. This man, this stranger who was my own blood, had spent 2 weeks in some abandoned warehouse to protect me from a threat I didn't even know I had. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Why do you care what happens to me? You don't know me. We don't know each other. He looked away into the shadows at the back of the building, and for a second I really thought he wasn't going to answer. Because I spent 58 years thinking I was completely alone in this world. He finally said, his voice heavy with this old, deep sadness. My mom died when I was 19. I never had any siblings. I never had any family but her. And when I found out I had sisters, that there were people out there I was related to, I felt something I'd never felt before. Hope. The idea that I might not be alone. He turned to me and I could see the tears welling up in his eyes. Melissa is already gone. It was just you and me left. And I wasn't going to let your son take everything from you before we could even meet. The tears I'd been holding back finally came flooding out. They were thick, hot, and I couldn't stop them. I cried for the son I'd lost for my father, who was a liar for my mom, who died without knowing the truth. For all the years Jake and I lived our lives, not even knowing the other existed. I cried until there was nothing left, just these dry sobs that shook my whole body. And Jake walked over and just hugged me. He didn't say anything. He didn't try to make me feel better with a bunch of empty words. He just held me while I fell to pieces. His hug was firm and warm, and he smelled like simple soap and honesty. And in that hug from a stranger who was my brother, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Safety. The feeling that somebody was in my corner no matter what, with no secret motives, no betrayal waiting for me. When I finally calmed down, Jake let me go and pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket. I took it and wiped my face, ashamed that I'd lost it like that. I'm sorry, I mumbled. He shook his head. Don't apologize. You have every right to cry. You have the right to feel everything you're feeling right now. I cried for weeks when I found out the truth about our father. He bent down and picked up the leather notebook I'd dropped on the floor. He opened it to a page he'd marked and showed me. Look at this. Here's the proof of who William Mitchell really was. I moved my phone's light closer. It was a journal entry from 1985. Patricia threatened today to tell everyone if I don't give her more money. I gave her an extra $500 to shut her up. Carol suspects something. I need to be more careful. The properties are bringing in good money. Soon I can buy the 5th house. I read entry after entry, and each one was colder and more twisted than the last. My father didn't write about love or regret. He wrote about money and control, about manipulation, how to keep his women separate, and how to make sure none of his kids ever knew about each other. How to squeeze every last dime out of the properties while giving us just enough to get by. It was a perfect record of a double, no triple life kept like an accountant's ledger but cold like a con man's heart. He was a monster, I said, and the words felt like acid in my throat. Jake shut the notebook slowly. He was human, a selfish, cowardly, cruel human, but still human. He sat on the concrete floor, his back against the wall, and motioned for me to sit with him. I did. I was too tired to stand anymore. You know what the saddest part is, Rye went on? That in the end, with all his money and properties and secrets, he died alone in some hospital. None of his women showed up. None of his kids were there. Only Ruth, the employee he paid to keep his secrets. Ruth was with him till the very end. I remembered what the old woman in the hotel lobby said. Jake nodded. She was the only loyal person he had, and it wasn't even about love. It was for some messed up loyalty and the 33 years of paychecks he gave her. But at least he had the decency to do one last thing, to give you that envelope to make sure you knew the truth. We sat there in silence for a few minutes. The warehouse was cold and you could feel the dampness coming in through the cracks in the metal. But there was something comforting about being in that crappy place with someone who got exactly what I was feeling. You said you had an idea. I finally broke the silence. Jake sat up straight and looked me right in the eye. The 5 properties our father left are worth about $800,000 in total. According to the will, we each get $400,000. It's money neither of us ever needed, but now it's ours. He paused, choosing his words. Here's my proposal. We sell the properties. We take that money and we use it to do something our father never did. Something good. Like what? Rye smiled for the first time since I met him, and it totally changed his face. Ruth needs money for her retirement. She worked her whole life and has almost nothing. We're going to give her $50,000. It's the least we can do for the woman who covered our father's tracks, but in the end helped us find each other. I nodded slowly. It made sense. It was fair. The rest we split, he said, but not to spend on ourselves. We use it to help other people. We can start a fund for single moms who clean houses just like our mothers did. Women raising kids on their own, working themselves to the bone to give them an education. We give them scholarships. We give them a shot. We do something that matters with all this dirty money. His eyes were burning with intensity. We turn a liar's legacy into hope for people who actually need it. The tears came back, but this time they felt different. They weren't from pain, but something closer to peace. Our father used that money to control and to hurt, I said slowly. We'll use it to set people free and to heal. Jake held his hand out to me. Are you in? I took his hand. It felt rough and strong, and I shook it. I'm in. We got up from the floor. I brushed off the dust and damp. Jake started gathering the papers scattered on the table, putting them in neat stacks. We're going to need a lawyer, someone to help us with all the legal stuff for the will and selling the properties. I nodded. I actually know someone, a neighbor who's a lawyer. She was always really nice to me. Jake smiled. Perfect. Tomorrow we get the paperwork started. Tomorrow. The word felt weird. Just a few hours ago, I didn't have a tomorrow. I was a wreck abandoned with no future at all. And now I had a brother, a plan, and something that felt like a purpose. Jake, I said as we walked to the warehouse exit, thank you for waiting for me, for looking out for me, for everything. He stopped at the door and looked at me. He had my father's eyes, but his were so much warmer. Don't thank me. We're family, and real family doesn't just ditch you in a hotel lobby with a bill you can't pay. Real family waits in a beat-up warehouse for 2 weeks just to make sure you're okay. His voice cracked a little. I've gone my whole life with no siblings. Now that I've found you, I'm never leaving you alone again. We walked out of the warehouse together. By now, the sky was completely dark. It was full of stars that looked like promises. Jake shut the metal door and snapped the padlock back on. This place did its job, he said. We don't need to come back here anymore. We walked down the empty industrial street. Our steps just fell into sync without us even trying. Jake walked me toward the bus stop. The street was empty, lit only by old flickering streetlights. The cold night air was starting to bite through my clothes, and I hugged myself trying to stay warm. He didn't say a word, just took off his jean jacket and put it over my shoulders. It smelled like laundry soap and honesty. So different from Brandon's expensive cologne and lies. Where do you live? Jake asked, shoving his hands in his pockets. I told him my address. It was an old building on the north side. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I paid for it with 30 years of hard work. That's far. I'll take you. I shook my head. I don't want to be any more trouble. He let out a little laugh. Jessica, I just spent 2 weeks waiting in an abandoned warehouse. Taking you home is no trouble at all. His pickup truck was parked a couple of blocks away. It was old, a dirty white color with dents in the doors and a crack in the corner of the windshield, but it started on the first try, the engine purring like it was well taken care of. I got in the passenger seat and buckled up while Jake blasted the heater. The inside smelled like old coffee and those cheap car air fresheners. He drove in silence for the first few minutes, just concentrating on the night traffic. I looked out the window, watching the factory-lined streets slowly change into regular neighborhoods. I saw families eating dinner through lit-up windows, kids playing on the sidewalks while their parents watched over them. Normal lives, simple, honest, everything I thought I had. And it all turned out to be one big elaborate lie. What do you do for work? Jake's question snapped me out of it. I clean houses 5 days a week, sometimes 6 if I need the extra money. Even I could hear how tired I sounded. He nodded slowly. My mom cleaned houses too. She worked until the cancer got so bad she couldn't even hold a broom. She died with her hands ruined and her back completely shot. She was 48 years old. The pain in his voice was so raw it felt like a punch to my gut. My mom died at 52, diabetes. She didn't have the money for her medicine. She kept on working until she just collapsed at one of her clients' houses. The owner didn't even call 911. She just called me to come get her because she was making a mess on the marble floor. The words came out bitter, filled with a rage I'd bottled up for 14 years. Jake hit the steering wheel with his palm, not hard, just full of helpless anger. Our mothers literally worked themselves to death while our father was busy buying up buildings. He could have helped them. He could have given us a much better life. But he chose his secrets and his control over everything. He rubbed his eyes with one hand like he was trying to block out bad memories. That's why I want to use the money to help other women, so no other mother has to die cleaning floors for people who don't even see them as human beings. So what do you do? I asked, needing to make the conversation a little less heavy. Jake gave a sad smile. I'm a mechanic. I own a small shop over on the south side. I fix old cars. You know, the ones rich people throw away? I don't make a lot, but it's honest work. Every dime I have, I earned it myself without cheating or lying to anybody. You could really hear the pride in his voice. A real pride my own son never had, Brandon. The thought of him just twisted a knife in my gut. My son, the kid I raised, I gave him my own food so he wouldn't have to go hungry. The kid I walked to school every day for 12 years, no matter if it was sunny or pouring rain, because we didn't have money for the bus. The same kid who cried in my arms when his heart was broken for the first time when he failed a test, when he felt like nobody wanted him. That kid turned into a cruel stranger who used me like I was some kind of disposable tool. Do you think he'll be back? The question just tumbled out of my mouth. Jake didn't answer right away. He just kept driving, hands steady on the wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead. Honestly, I don't know. Greed does weird things to people. He might just take the loss and disappear, or he might pull something desperate. He glanced at me from the corner of his eye. That's why I want you to have this. He grabbed something from the console between the seats and handed it to me. It was a card with his phone number scribbled on it. If Brandon tries to contact you, if he threatens you, if you even think you're in danger, you call me immediately. Doesn't matter what time it is, day or night. You call me and I'll be there. By the sound of his voice, I knew he meant it. This man who I'd just met a few hours ago was ready to protect me while my own son, who I'd spent 38 years with, had planned to destroy me. I slipped the card into my purse next to the warehouse documents. Jake, there's something I don't get. He glanced at me for a second before looking back at the road. Why did Dad write the will like that, with that part about heirs trying to screw each other over? If he spent his whole life lying and playing games, why put some moral rule in his will? Jake let out a long breath. I've thought a lot about that. I think at the end, when he knew he was dying, he had a moment of clarity, or maybe he was just a coward. He wasn't brave enough to tell us the truth while he was alive, but he wanted to make sure that after he died, none of his kids would destroy each other for his dirty money. It was his own twisted way of protecting us, not from ourselves, but from each other. One last mind game, I said bitterly. Still pulling the strings even from the grave. Jake nodded. Yeah, but this time his game actually protected us, without that clause. Your son would have won. He would have crushed you in court and taken everything. Our father, for the first time in his selfish life, did something that actually helped us, even if it was by accident. We pulled up to my building about 20 minutes later. It was a gray 5-story concrete block with small balconies full of hanging laundry and pots with half-dead plants. It wasn't pretty, but it was my home. Jake killed the engine and turned to look at me. You gonna be okay tonight? You could hear in his voice that he was genuinely worried. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. I'll be fine. I've got a lot to process, but I'll be fine. I got out of the truck and handed his jacket back to him. He took it, but stayed put. Jessica, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I've got a meeting with my lawyer. Can you come? I want you to be there when we start this whole will process. I thought about it for a second. I had work tomorrow, 3 houses to clean, but this was way more important. This was the future. I'll be there. Just give me the address. Jake pulled out his phone and texted me the location. Then he got out of the truck and walked around to my side. He gave me a quick, tight hug and said, "You're going to get through this. All of it. The pain, the betrayal, all the confusion. You'll get through it because you're a lot stronger than you think." He pulled back and looked me right in the eyes. "And you're not alone. Not anymore. You've got me now." I walked up the stairs to my apartment on the 3rd floor. Every step was a struggle after the longest day of my life. I opened the door and walked into my little 2-room apartment. Everything was exactly how I left it Friday morning before Brandon picked me up for the hotel. The dirty coffee cup in the sink, the newspaper open on the table, my unmade bed. It was like time had frozen. But I wasn't the same person who left this place 3 days ago. That Jessica was naive. She still actually believed in her son. She was living in a fantasy world of a happy family. This Jessica knew the truth now about her father, her son, and how weak family ties are when money gets involved. But she also learned something else, that family doesn't always come from where you'd expect. Sometimes it shows up as a brother you never knew you had, waiting in an old warehouse just to make sure you're safe. I collapsed on the sofa, didn't even take my shoes off. I was completely wiped out physically and emotionally. I closed my eyes. For a second, all I could hear was the quiet in my apartment and my own heartbeat. Tomorrow, the lawyers would get involved. Tomorrow, I'd have to face the music for everything I found out. But tonight, I just needed a minute to breathe. Then my phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out thinking it was Jake, but it wasn't him. It was Brandon. The message just stared at me from the screen. "Mom, we need to talk. Please just give me a chance to explain. It's not what you think. I love you, your son Brandon." I read it once, then twice, then a 3rd time. And each time my stomach just twisted a little more. "I love you." Those 2 words had been my whole world for 38 years. Now they just sounded hollow fake. My fingers were shaking over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to text him back. The part of me that's still a mom who remembers a little boy grabbing my leg because he was scared of the dark. But another part, the part that had been forced to grow up in the last few hours, knew that answering was a bad idea. Brandon didn't want to explain. He wanted to play me. It's the only thing he knows how to do now. I blocked his number. It was easy, just 3 taps on the screen, but it felt like I was cutting a tie that had been there for almost 4 decades. I cried when I did it. Tears just rolled down my cheeks and dripped onto my phone, making the letters all blurry. I was mourning something that was probably never even real. The son I loved was all in my head. The real man was just a cruel stranger. I got up from the couch and walked over to the window. From the 3rd floor, I could see the street barely lit by flickering streetlights. A stray dog was digging through some trash. A young couple walked by holding hands. Life just went on. Like it didn't even notice I was hurting. I wondered how many other people in those buildings were living their own quiet nightmares. How many mothers had been betrayed by their own kids? How many family secrets were hiding behind all those lit-up windows? My phone buzzed again, an unknown number this time. My heart started pounding. I hesitated for a second before opening it. "Jessica, it's Ashley. Please listen to me. Brandon is a mess. We screwed up. We can fix this. You'll forgive us, won't you? You're his mother. Mothers always forgive." I got so angry I had to sit down so I didn't fall. Ashley, the woman who planned to humiliate me like it was all a big game, now she's asking for forgiveness. Not because she's sorry, but because they lost. I blocked that number too. Then I just turned my phone off and threw it on the table. I needed some quiet. I needed to think. I walked into my bedroom and just collapsed on the bed in my clothes. The sheets smelled like cheap laundry soap. I closed my eyes and tried to get some sleep, but my mind was just racing, mixing old memories with what just happened. I saw a 5-year-old Brandon crying because the other kids made fun of his secondhand clothes. I hugged him and promised that someday he'd have new things. I remembered Brandon at 15 so proud when he won his first science award. I'd worked a double shift that week just to pay for his project. I saw him at 25 introducing me to Ashley, telling me she was the love of his life. I cried because I was so happy my son had found someone. All those memories are poison now. Every hug, every smile, every "I love you, Mom" now feels like a lie. When did he start to change? When did he stop seeing me as his mother and start seeing me as a problem? Was it when he found out about my father's properties? Or was there always the dark side to him that I just didn't want to see? The questions just spun around in my head with no answers. Finally, around 3 in the morning, I was so exhausted I just passed out. I dreamed about my father. We were in a house I'd never seen before. It was huge and empty. He walked ahead of me, always just out of reach no matter how fast I ran. Every room I opened was full of pictures of people I didn't know, whole families smiling at the camera, and in every single photo, my father was there with his arm around different women, different kids, all his secret lives hanging on the walls like trophies. I shot awake at 6 in the morning, my heart pounding and the sheets soaked with sweat. The gray morning light was creeping through the window. I dragged myself out of bed, my body aching like I'd been in a fight all night. I went to the bathroom and splashed my face with ice-cold water, trying to snap back to reality. The woman in the mirror looked 10 years older. Deep, dark circles, chapped lips, wrinkles that looked deeper. Pain really does age you. I made coffee as the sun came up. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapping my hands around the hot mug, letting the steam warm my face. Today, I had to go with Jake to the lawyers. Today, we'd officially start to untangle my father's inheritance. Today, I had to be strong. But right then, in my quiet kitchen, I let myself be weak. I let myself feel the full weight of his betrayal. At 8, I turned my phone on. There were 15 messages from Brandon from a bunch of different numbers. I didn't open them. I just deleted them all without reading them. There were 5 missed calls from Ashley. I ignored those too. And there was one message from Jake sent at 7 in the morning. Good morning, Jessica. Hope you got some rest. I'll be waiting for you at 10. We're going to start fixing this together. Your brother, Jake. Those 2 words gave me a strange, warm feeling. I'd never had any siblings. I was always an only child, but now I had Jake, a man who protected me when he could have just ignored me, who offered to be my partner when he could have seen me as the competition, who called me his sister after we'd only known each other a day. Family doesn't always come from where you'd expect. Sometimes it shows up in a dark, abandoned warehouse. I took a shower, put on my nicest clothes, a dark gray dress I saved for special occasions, and I did my hair carefully. I needed to look like I had it all together. I needed to feel in control, even if inside I was a total mess. At 9:30, I got on the bus to downtown New York where the lawyer's office was. The ride was long. The morning traffic was loud and awful. But I used that time to get my head straight. Jake was already waiting outside when I got there. He was wearing black pants and a crisp white shirt. He looked nervous, but you could tell he was determined. He smiled when he saw me walking up. I was worried you might change your mind. I shook my head. No, I have to do this for myself, for my mom, and for the truth to finally come out. He just nodded and offered me his arm. I took it, and we walked into the building together. The office was on the 5th floor with beige walls and framed diplomas, and bookshelves packed with law books. The lawyer, James, was a guy about 50 with thick glasses and a serious look on his face. He gave us a formal handshake and pointed to the leather chairs in front of his big, dark wood desk. Jake gave me the basics over the phone, James said, opening a thick file. But I need you to walk me through it from the start. Every little detail matters. So for the next hour, Jake and I laid it all out for him. Our dad's secret family's the will with that special clause. Brandon's plan to ruin me and take the inheritance for himself, the proof Rye had gathered, the papers from the warehouse, everything. James took careful notes the whole time, asking specific questions and making sure he understood. He kept a professional, straight face, but I saw his eyebrows shoot up a few times at the really shocking parts. This is messy but doable, James finally said, closing his notebook. The clause in the will is pretty clear. If we can prove Brandon tried to cheat Sandra out of her inheritance, he automatically loses his right to any of it. The proof I got is solid. We've got emails, texts, bank records. It's more than enough. Then he looked right at me. But I have to ask you, Miss Jessica, are you really ready for this? Going through with this means your son is going to face the music, maybe even criminal charges. Can you handle that? That question hit me like a ton of bricks. Was I ready to see my own son charged with a crime? The mom in me was screaming, no, begging me to find another way to just forgive him. But the part of me that he'd humiliated and betrayed and used knew I had no other choice. I'm ready, I said, my voice stronger than I thought it would be. My son made his choices. Now he has to deal with the consequences. James nodded like he approved. Then he started explaining the legal steps. First, he'd take the evidence to the notary handling the will. After that, they'd call a formal hearing and summon all the heirs. Brandon would get a chance to defend himself, but with all the evidence Jake had, he wouldn't have many options. This whole thing will probably take 4 to 6 weeks, James said, as he organized the papers on his desk. But I can tell you right now, the outcome is pretty much a sure thing. Brandon's going to lose his rights. The inheritance will be split between you two. Jake and I looked at each other. We have a plan for that money, I said. We don't want to keep it all for ourselves. We want to start a fund to help single moms who clean houses, give their kids scholarships, some financial help, opportunities. James took his glasses off and looked at us in a way I hadn't seen before. It was respect, maybe even admiration. This is incredible, he said. I can help you set up a legal foundation to make sure the money is used right, that it gets to the people who really need it. We spent another hour going over the details. Things like what to name the foundation. How would we even pick the people who get the money? How much of it would go to scholarships for school, and how much would be for direct financial help? Jake suggested we call it the Carol and Patricia Foundation after our moms. I just nodded, my eyes filled with tears. It was perfect. Our mothers died broke and forgotten, but now they'd have a legacy that would help other women avoid the same thing. When we left the office, it was almost 2 in the afternoon. The sun was shining, and the city was buzzing with life. Jake asked me if I wanted to grab a bite. We found a little family-run place 2 blocks away with plastic tables and a menu on a chalkboard. We both ordered turkey chili and a soda. We ate in silence for a few minutes, each of us just stuck in our own heads. You think our moms would be proud? I finally asked, just to break the silence. Jake put his spoon down and looked right at me. I think they'd be more than proud. They'd be floored. Their kids who grew up apart, who didn't even know each other existed, found each other and decided to turn all this pain into hope. That's a hell of a lot more than our father did in his whole life. He was right. Our father spent decades collecting property and secrets, just building walls between his families. And in less than 24 hours, we had decided to tear those walls down and use his money to build something better. Are you scared about the hearing? Jake asked. I thought about it honestly. Yeah, I'll have to see Brandon face to face, hear his excuses, his lies. Watch him try to manipulate everyone like he always does. But I know I have to do it. It's not for revenge, it's for justice, so I can close this chapter and move on. Jake nodded slowly. I'll be right there with you through the whole hearing. You won't have to face him alone. We finished eating and just walked around downtown New York with no real destination. We passed shops, parks, and street carts. We were surrounded by people, every single one living their own complicated story. You know the weirdest part of all this? I said as we sat down on a bench under a huge tree. If Brandon hadn't been so greedy, if he hadn't stabbed me in the back so cruelly, I never would have known the truth. I never would have gone to that warehouse. I never would have met you. Jake let out a dry laugh. It's ironic, isn't it? His betrayal is what brought us together. His plan to destroy you ended up creating something he never expected, a real family. We sat there for almost an hour just talking, sharing stories about growing up apart, but in strangely similar ways. Our moms' struggles, the things they gave up for us, the times we were hungry and cold, and the small wins that we celebrated like they were huge. We found out we had more in common than just blood. The next few weeks were a total blur of lawyers' meetings with James and getting ready for the hearing. Brandon tried to call me 1,000,000 times, texting from new numbers, leaving letters at my door. He even showed up at my building once. But I didn't cave. Jake had given me an emergency whistle and the number of a cop he knew. Every time Brandon got close, we wrote it down, more proof of harassment for the case. Ashley tried something different. She posted a fake story online about me being a cruel mom who was trying to destroy her son for cash. A few people I know messaged me asking if it was true. I told them what was really happening. Some believed me. Others took Brandon's side. I guess in a crisis, you find out who your real friends are. And that list was shorter than I thought. But I found some new people in my corner too. Ruth, the receptionist from the hotel, stopped by one afternoon. She brought homemade cookies and tea. We sat in my small living room and she just cried, asking me to forgive her for giving Brandon information all those months ago. I didn't know he was going to use it to hurt you, she sobbed. I thought he just wanted to get to know his grandfather. I hugged her and said it wasn't her fault. She was just as much a victim of my dad's secrets as any of us. The night before the hearing, I could barely sleep. I got up 3 times for water. I checked my dark gray dress 5 times to make sure it was clean and pressed. I kept going over what I'd say if they asked me to speak. At 4 in the morning, I finally gave up and made coffee. I sat by the window and watched the city slowly wake up, the sky changing from black to gray to orange. Rye got there at 8 o'clock to come with me. He had on a dark suit that looked new, probably bought just for this. Ready? He asked. I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The hearing was in the notary building. It was an old, classy place in the historic part of downtown. We went into a big room with dark wood walls, comfy chairs, and a long desk where the notary and lawyers would sit. Brandon was already there. He looked terrible, with huge dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled suit. Ashley was right next to him, makeup perfect, but her face was so tense. When they saw me walk in, Brandon shot up. "Mom, please," he started, but his lawyer yanked him back down. Jake gave my shoulder a little squeeze, and we sat down on the opposite side of the room. The line was clearly drawn, them on one side, us on the other. The notary came in, an older man with snow-white hair and a very stern look. He sat, looked over the papers, and started the hearing. For for the next 2 hours. James laid out all the proof, the emails where Brandon planned to humiliate me, the payments to private investigators, the text messages between him and Ashley laughing about how naive I was, and the testimony from Ruth. It was all out in the open under the cold lights of that room. Brandon's lawyer tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that his client was just researching his family history, that what happened at the hotel was a mix-up. But his arguments sounded pathetic against all the evidence we had. The notary just listened, jotting down a few notes. You couldn't tell what he was thinking. When it was our turn to talk, Brandon stood up. "I just wanted what was mine," he said, his voice shaking with anger and desperation. "My grandfather was rich and we were poor. Why'd he hoard all that while my mom cleaned houses till she couldn't anymore? I had a right to that money. I needed it. I deserved it." He looked right at me. "And you, Mom, you never would have done anything with that money. You would have just wasted it on charity or let it sit there. I was going to do something great with it." I stood up, even surprising myself. "You're right about one thing, Brandon. Your grandfather was rich and he kept us poor. That was cruel and it wasn't fair, but your answer was to be just like him, to lie, to manipulate, to use people. You became him." My voice cracked, but I kept going. "I would have given you everything if you had just asked me. Everything, but you chose to tear me down instead of trusting me. And that choice says a lot more about you than it does about him." The room was dead silent after that. Brandon just collapsed back into his chair, with his head in his hands. Ashley was crying silently. The notary snapped his folder shut. "I've heard enough. The evidence is clear. Brandon Cooper broke the rule in the will about lying between heirs. Because of that, he loses all rights to William Mitchell's inheritance. The entire estate will be split between the other legal heirs, Jessica Mitchell and Kevin Mitchell." He banged his gavel on the desk. "This hearing is closed." We walked out of the lawyer's office into a bright sun that just felt wrong. Jake gave me a tight hug on the sidewalk. "You did it. You stood up to him and you won." But I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt empty and sad. I won in court, but I'd lost my son. "We're going to turn this pain into something good," Jake said, like he was reading my mind. "We're going to help so many families. All the good we'll do, your son can never take that away." 6 months later, the Carol and Patricia Foundation was officially open. We'd sold the 5 properties for $820,000. We gave $50,000 to Ruth, who cried for a whole hour when we gave her the check. We split the rest apart for us to make sure we were okay, and the biggest part for the foundation. In our first year, we gave out 30 full scholarships to the kids of housekeepers. We helped 50 moms with emergency rent money. We funded 3 small businesses for women who wanted to stop cleaning houses. I never talked to Brandon again. I heard from other people that he and Ashley got divorced 6 months after the hearing, that he moved to another city and has some dead-end job. A part of me still aches when I think about him. He's my son. That kind of love doesn't just disappear. But I learned that loving someone doesn't mean you have to let them destroy you. Sometimes the hardest kind of love is loving from a distance. Jake became my real family. We have dinner together every Sunday. We celebrate birthdays. We cry together on the days our mothers passed away. So we worked together at the foundation, interviewing families and giving out scholarships. We watched our dad's dirty money finally do something good. Then one day we were in my tiny apartment going over applications, and Jake said something I'll never forget. He said our father taught us exactly how not to live. He showed us the wrong path so clearly we had to go the other way. In a messed up way, he actually gave us a gift. He made us sure of the kind of people we never wanted to be. He was right. I didn't want to be like my dad, keeping secrets and building a whole life on lies. I didn't want to be like my son, wrecking people just for money. I wanted to be like my mom, and like Jake's mom, women who worked themselves to the bone to give their kids a better life. Today, 3 years after that afternoon, at the hotel where everything fell apart, I look back and I get it. The pain was real. The betrayal was crushing, but something I never expected grew from all that wreckage. A bond with a man who should have been a stranger, but he ended up being my rock. A foundation with the names of 2 forgotten women that now helps hundreds. And a version of me that's stronger, a whole lot wiser, and finally free from the lies that defined my family for generations. My son left me flat broke in a fancy hotel, but an older receptionist handed me an envelope that changed my life. Inside wasn't just a key to a storage unit. It was the key to the truth, and even though that truth shattered me, it also set me free. Now I get to live without the weight of secrets that weren't mine, without pretending we were a perfect family that never existed. I'm just left with the messy but honest reality of who I am and what I'm going to do with the time I have left. And I found out that's worth more than anything.